Stories are double standards. My name is Osadumebi, and every week I will tell you a short story written by a Nigerian writer or author. That's the long and short of it. So without much ado, this week's story is by Obianuju Chisomebi, and it's titled Conundrum. As Olisa watched his wife slip into her red see-through nightie, he could not help imagining her slipping out of her clothes in front of another man. He imagined this other man salivating at her hourglass figure, burying his fingers in her ridiculously long black hair and sticking his tongue into her mouth. Ihoma, with all her modesty, curvy body, and the perfect symmetry to her face. She was not the type of woman a man could easily resist. Even his cousin, Obinna, had once teased him about snatching her from him. Olisa could remember the look of concern that formed deep furrows on Njide's brows and spread across her dark chocolate face as she told him that there was something he had to know. Something that could turn his world upside down. Something about Ihoma. She had spat the words out as he drove her to the airport, spilling her guts almost as soon as he sped off from his peach-painted duplex in Ikeja. And although he was the one who had encouraged her to speak freely, no, he had insisted she tell him what was weighing heavily on her mind. He regretted letting her spew such words. Now, with his eyes pinned on Ihoma in her nightie, Olisa visualized the features of the suspected lover. A married man who had a hard time keeping his zippers up. Perhaps a single guy who was so embittered that a woman like Ihoma was already taken. And maybe, just maybe, this man was sating her sexual hunger, which he had not bothered to attend to in the last 3 weeks. Jealousy clutched his heart. It could not be. Mbano, not his Ihoma. The whole thing had been tormenting him since he had dropped Njide off at the airport in the morning. I should give it time, he thought to himself. He believed time would wash away this awful feeling from his being. So, he decided to cease sifting Njide's words. He suffocated the memory of her worried face at the airport, and he tried not to recollect the coldness of his own tone when he asked her to tell Mama and Papa that he would visit them in Ebonyi soon. But he was not upset at Njide. How could he be? She was his only sister, and he loved her deeply. And she was always quick to take his side, always quick to trample on anyone she suspected was against him. But he was now conflicted over what Njide had shared about Ihoma, who was too decent to throw her virtue into the gutter. She was even the leader of a women's prayer group in church. Perhaps Njide should not have come to spend some time with them. She should not have tried to fish out skeletons that could not possibly exist. Blinking away the image of Ihoma in the arms of another man, Olisa got up from the large bed and walked towards where she stood, her long and slender fingers massaging cream into her skin. He wrapped his hands around her waist and worked his tongue on her neck, sliding it towards her right ear. He had always been extravagant when it came to spending his money on her. What else could a woman want? He reassured himself that Ihoma loved him too much, that he gave her more than most men gave their wives, that she could not and would never spread her legs for another man. In a few minutes, they were rumpling the sheets on the bed, but it was nothing like what he did with Ada, curvy and sexy Ada. The following day at noon, Olisa was at Ada's flat, banging and banging on the metal door. He had woken up, fully expecting to be rid of the adulterous images Njide had planted in his head. But alas, they were still there, like a fresh wound, troubling his entire being. All the reassurances he had given himself had done little to crush the maddening feeling. "What took you so long?" he bellowed as Ada opened the door. She took his left hand as she backed away from the door, apologizing, her tone soft and sultry. She mumbled something about getting ready for him and gave him a coy smile, the same one that had made him wind down the window of his Range Rover Sport while he was driving past Unilag Gate one cold evening. He let his eyes feed on her, the taut nipples jutting through her white crop top, and those wide hips made obvious by her high-waist jeans. It was not that Ada was prettier than Ihoma. She did not have Ihoma's beautiful brown eyes or her butter-colored skin. Ada was just fresh soup. Sensing he was upset about something that had nothing to do with her door, Ada let his eyes feast for a while before she inched closer once their eyes met. Without breaking his gaze, she touched his face and traced her finger down his jawline, along his neck, into his jacket. She grabbed his lapel and gently pulled him close. By the time he was inside her, he could no longer remember the accusing quality of Njide's tone, not even the way her eyes twitched as she said all she had said about Ihoma. He rolled over to the other side of the bed as soon as he was done. Ada got up almost immediately and started getting dressed. "Babe, I have a class in an hour," she said. He nodded. He would drop her off at Unilag Gate and return to his office before going home to Ihoma and their 5-year-old daughter, Mmesoma. Obinna came over for lunch on Saturday. He came wearing his infectious smile and spent almost 30 minutes asking about Mmesoma, and then about Mr. and Mrs. Okeowo, the couple living in the next compound, the ones whose children Mmesoma played with during the weekends, and the same ones she was playing with now. Obinna wasted no time in digging into the mound of pounded yam and dipping balls of it into the ofe onugbu. "Ha! This is beautiful, just beautiful. I have told Olisaemeka that whenever he wakes up in the morning, he should bow down and kiss your feet," Obinna said. "How many of these our fancy Lagos restaurants can prepare food this delicious with all their exorbitant prices, eh?" Olisa smiled and shook his head. Ihoma was no doubt a palatable cook, but Obinna enjoyed exaggerating everything about her. Not once had he hidden his fondness of her. "Obi, you're not serious, so I wonder if you'll be praising my cooking like this when you finally get married," Ihoma said, and smiled accusingly at him. "Ha ha! Ihoma, umuwanyi. We may have too much wahala, oh. Please, I will control my mouth when that happens." "You and all these your statements, Obi," Olisa said as he poured himself a glass of water. "Maybe you should have become a lawyer instead of doing this your creative writing thing," Ihoma said. "Maybe, oh, beautiful one, maybe," Obinna smiled. "But you see, the law court has never been in my vision." He winked at her. "You will know Nzuzu," she teased. Laughter erupted, but not from Olisa. Later that evening, after Obinna left, Njide called. "Nwannem, ọ dịkwa mma?" she asked with a hint of worry in her tone. "Gigi, I'm fine," Olisa replied, intentionally using his pet name for her to ease her fears, even as he battled to suppress the sudden surge of emotions the sound of her voice unleashed. "Mmesokwanu, she asked. Has she asked about me since I left? Yes, she has. Olisa was fighting the memory of their drive to the airport. He did not want to remember how Njide had begun to lay out her suspicions, or the way he had stopped her from going into further details because he had not wanted to hear her reasons nor believe the accusations. How is Sister Ihoma? Njide asked finally. Odemma, he said. She is preparing dinner. He slowly walked out of the sitting room and into his bedroom, while Njide talked about how Mama was thinking of expanding her tailoring shop, and how Papa almost slipped and broke his head in the bathroom the other night. Nwanne m nwoke, biko, gbaghara m maka ihe mere mbosi a. Njide apologized in Igbo for their last conversation. I did not mean to. Ozugo, Olisa interrupted. It is all right. I am not upset at you. I know that you have my best interest at heart. It's okay. He finished and took a deep breath. With his last escapade with Ada, he thought he had successfully crippled thoughts of Ihoma sleeping with another man. But now, he was uneasy again. Why had Njide called? The mere imagination of Ihoma with another man was an eyesore to him. He had not chastised Njide for accusing Ihoma of adultery, but he recalled his cold and blunt reply. Anugum, I know that you love me very much, but Oma cannot be cheating on me. After the call with Njide ended, he got dressed. He would go to Ada to free his mind again. But first, he went to meet Ihoma in the kitchen. She was frying plantains to a fine yellow, just the way she liked them. Oli, where are you going? She asked. Just out to see a friend. She flipped over 3 slices of plantain in the pan. Okay, so you will not be back for dinner? She looked at him. No, I won't, he responded. She had never given him any reason to doubt her fidelity. She had never challenged any of his decisions, nor his spending nights outside. In fact, she had, in his eyes, always been the Proverbs 31 woman. He turned away and muttered, I won't return until it is very late. Please don't wait up for me. Olisa returned home to an already sleeping Ihoma. Even in sleep, she was beautiful. He heard the wind howling through the streets, followed by thunderclaps and then pounding rain. He went over and shut the windows. He stood a few minutes watching the downpour. And as he did, images of Ada's naked body crawled into his mind. They'd had a good time together, and he would have stayed the night with her to endure the weather, but he had to wake up early for church the next day. He turned away from the window and stared at Ihoma again, her naked body visible through her lace nightie. He thought of how it was with her, how their intimacy lacked the flavor he enjoyed with Ada, how she did little to satisfy the ends of his lustful desires. And he would have climbed into bed with her, but his mind was betraying him again as he imagined his Ihoma giving herself to another man. He imagined her moaning in the bliss of forbidden pleasure, clutching this man tightly against her body and saying that he did it better than her own husband. Hell! Then a thought crossed his mind. He picked up Ihoma's phone and went into their bathroom. He unlocked it and started scrolling through her call log and then scanning her messages. There was nothing fishy. He hissed at himself. Would a cheating wife actually leave the messages of her lover on her phone? God, why could he not just let go of these rubbish thoughts, eh? What was actually wrong with him? His life was running smoothly. Why did he have to punish himself with pondering over an accusation that he could think of a million reasons why it could never be true? He had just about decided to lock the phone and go to sleep when he caught sight of messages from Obinna. Wasn't Ihoma special to Obinna? He might even have married her if Olisa had not. God, how could he think such a thing? Hey, there was no way. Obinna would never betray him so. He would not open the messages. Olisa, Ibatago. Ihoma was knocking at the toilet door. He collected himself, locked the phone screen, and slid it into his pocket before opening the door. When did you get back? She asked as she hugged him, then walked into the toilet to relieve herself. He reckoned it was the sound of the rain that had prevented him from hearing her footsteps. He put the phone back in its place, and on her return, they snuggled up in bed together. Ihoma fell back asleep almost immediately, but Olisa lay awake, still tormented. He could call Njide to ask her why she was suspicious of Ihoma. But no, if he did, he would be breathing life into her words. He would be accepting that he was not man enough to keep his wife faithful to him. No, he would not call Njide. And it was the same reason why he would not confront Ihoma. Never. Daddy, I came first. Miss Oma ran towards Olisa, waving an envelope. Ihoma had just brought her back from school. He put his laptop aside just before she came crashing into him. He hugged her before taking the report card she extended. Slowly, he looked through its pages. Odogu, he cheered. Like father, like daughter. Yes, so, Ihoma said. His phone vibrated. It was a message from Ada. He was supposed to be spending the night with her. Daddy, remember that you promised that you would give me a treat if I came first. My princess, a promise is a promise. But that will have to be tomorrow, Inugo. He lifted his head and caught Ihoma smiling at both of them. He smiled back. 2 days later, he took Miss Oma out. And after he was done spoiling her with ice cream and cookies, he took her to Mr. and Mrs. Okeowo to play with their kids. Obinna was joining them for lunch later that afternoon. You guys will not believe my latest miracle, Obinna was saying as he shoved some of the coconut rice down his throat. Obinna, you have come again. Ngwa, what is the new miracle? Ihoma raised an eyebrow. Ichotago nwunye. Olisa cast a glance her way, and Obinna laughed. Far from it, beautiful one. He scooped some pepper soup and winked at her. Better still be expecting me on more Saturdays to come. And then he took animated slurps, oohing and eyeing with each slurp. Oma, are you praying for my cousin not to find a wife, eh? Obinna and Ihoma laughed. But Olisa had not meant it as a joke. Olisa, leave that thing. Your wife enjoys the way I compliment her cooking. Try sounding more like me. Olisa managed to let out a smile. We're waiting now, Obi. What is this miracle? Ihoma asked. So, I just signed a contract with Narrative Landscape for my new book. Oh my goodness, Obi, that is amazing. Congratulations. Ihoma dragged him to his feet to give him a hug. And as their bodies met, Olisa's appetite melted into irritation. For the first time, he did not approve of their friendship. Obi, congrats, he said, extending his hand for a shake. How could he not see that Obinna was in love with his wife? And it was obvious that Ihoma felt something deep for him too. Something he never thought would irritate him Olisemeka, if you will not finish that your coconut rice and the pepper soup, please let me know. My stomach is still rumbling, Obinna said, as he and Ihoma continued to banter. Olisa went to Ada's place after Obinna left. He returned home later in the night, feeling better than he had felt during lunch. Ihoma was taking a shower. He unbuckled his belt and began pulling down his trouser. He had scolded his mind for its earlier conception about Obinna. This was someone who was like a brother to him. Someone who had always had his back. He began to pull off his shirt when he heard Ihoma's phone ringing. The call cut off before he could pick it up. He made to see the caller, but she had changed her password. He thought for a moment. He could easily unlock her phone without its password. Oli, how was your meeting? Ihoma said as she came out of the bathroom. He studied her face. She seemed as happy as she always did. She gave him a hug before releasing him for his bath. As they both lay down to sleep, he began to wonder why she had changed her password. Did she know that he had gone through her phone the other day? And if she did, what could she be hiding? He knew she would not confront him about such a thing. She never faulted his decisions. He heard the hammering rain as he shut his eyes. When he was certain that Ihoma was deep in sleep, he took her phone into the toilet. He tapped the screen and unlocked it on his third attempt. He clicked on the call log. And as he went to tap on the red digits of the missed call, he heard the toilet door push open. Startled, he lost grip of the phone, and it met the marble floor with a flump as Ihoma stared at him goggle-eyed. He gulped and made to answer, but he woke up with a start to the sound of roaring thunder and pelting rain. Heart racing and disoriented, he glanced around the room. The bedside clock flashed midnight. So it was just a dream? He was confused. He stared at Ihoma, the rise and fall of her breath soft in his ears. But what if it were real? What would have happened next? His eyes lingered on her face before he decided to lay back on the bed. He extended his hand to her waist and pulled her close. He had to rid himself of these thoughts, or he would lose his mind. He was sure of it. Obianuju Chisomebi is a writer who resides in Lagos, Nigeria. She is also a lawyer and a movie enthusiast. She believes that telling captivating stories can touch the deepest parts of the human soul and change the world for the better. You can read more of her work on Medium at Obianuju Chisomebi and on Kalahari Review. And you can connect with her on Instagram at The Phenomenal Uju and on X at Phenomenal Uju. Details and links will be in the episode description. If you've got a story you would like to be featured on this podcast, or a published book you want to make into an audiobook, send an email to info@osadumebi.com or send me a message at Osadumebi on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or X. I look forward to collaborating with you. And if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell someone, everyone, that stories are a good escape for a few minutes each week.